He was trapped, a blind omega, cornered in the vast, silent office of the very alpha who had just brought his entire world crashing down around him. He had been alone, he was sure of it, but a presence had materialized from the shadows, a predator in its den. And then the voice came, a sound as smooth and as lethal as polished steel, slicing through the profound quiet he had mistaken for a sanctuary. You have precisely 10 seconds to explain your presence in my private office before my security team physically removes you from the premises. The city outside was a cacophony, a relentless orchestra of chaos, and for most of his life, I was merely a muted instrument, tucked away inside a velvet-lined case. From the opulent penthouse my family insisted on calling a home, the gilded cage where they kept me concealed, the world's noises were muffled but never truly absent. The far-off cry of an ambulance was a mournful woodwind, the ceaseless hum of traffic a deep, percussive rhythm, and the collective murmur of millions of souls I would never encounter was a bewildering, crushing chorus. My existence was a carefully managed landscape of sound, scent, and texture. It was a world devoid of judging glances, because it was a world lived without sight. But on this night, my protective case had been violently thrown open. I was being thrust onto a stage, forced to perform a role in a deeply humiliating opera composed entirely by my family's failures. Brian, for heaven's sake, stop slouching. My mother's voice was a series of sharp, painful notes right beside me. Her fingers, like tiny talons, dug into the flesh of my arm. Her personal scent, a prim floral arrangement on any other day, was now curdled by the acrid stench of her fear and palpable resentment. Everyone is staring. Everyone was always staring. I couldn't see their eyes, of course, but I could feel the tangible weight of their collective gaze. It was a physical sensation, an unnerving prickling across the back of my neck, a pressure against my skin. And tonight that pressure was heavier, more suffocating than I had ever known it to be. My father had lost everything. His own grandfather's legacy, the corporate giant known as Brew Industries, had been ruthlessly consumed in a hostile takeover. The predator's name was Stephen Rain, and this gala, this glittering affair held within the cold, intimidating steel and glass fortress of Apex Industries, was no celebration. It was the formal signing of our surrender. My very presence here was the final, most bitter term of that surrender. I was the defective Omega son, the family secret usually kept under lock and key, now being trotted out as a living symbol of our absolute and total ruin. A beautiful, yet broken, artifact for the conqueror to gaze upon with pity. The ballroom was a nightmare for the senses. The air was a thick, cloying soup, a mixture of 100 different expensive perfumes and colognes all vying for dominance, making each breath a struggle. The polished floor beneath my feet vibrated with the relentless, pounding bass of some generic, soulless music, a frantic, artificial heartbeat driving the cacophony of mingling voices. The sound of laughter was everywhere, sharp and brittle like shattering crystal. The murmurs that slithered through the crowd were slick with false sincerity. The constant, nervous chiming of champagne flutes formed a persistent, unsettling melody. This was a predator's den, and the very air thrummed with the electric current of their combined greed and naked ambition. I could taste the insincerity, feel the tectonic shifts of allegiances, sense the thinly veiled scorn directed at my family. It was a hurricane of emotional noise, and it was making my head spin. My cane, a delicate extension of my own body, tapped out a frantic, desperate rhythm against the unforgivingly polished marble, trying to find some purchase in the overwhelming chaos. "Mother, I just need a moment of quiet," I managed to whisper, my own voice a fragile thread nearly lost in the overwhelming din. "There is no quiet for us tonight, Brian," she hissed back, her words laced with venom. "Smile. You look pathetic." Her grip on my arm became a vice, pulling me forward, dragging me through a dense thicket of bodies. A sudden wave of expensive gin and a heavy, musky cologne washed over me as someone brushed past too closely. I flinched, recoiling from the contact. The sheer press of people was suffocating, their movements erratic and unpredictable. The detailed mental map of my surroundings that I so carefully constructed in any new space had completely dissolved, leaving me adrift in a swirling vortex. I was drowning in a sea of bodies and noise. Panic, a cold and sharp-edged thing, began to claw its way up my throat. I had to get out. I had to escape. "I am going to the restroom," I stated, my voice surprisingly firm this time. I didn't bother waiting for her permission. With a gentle but decisive tug, I pulled my arm free from her grasp. I heard the beginning of her protest, a sharp intake of breath, but her voice was immediately swallowed by the ravenous crowd. I was alone. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to anchor myself, to isolate a single, consistent thread in the chaotic tapestry of sound that surrounded me. The music, that relentless thumping, was loudest to my left. So, I turned right, aiming for what my instincts told me must be a hallway. My cane swept out before me, my only shield and guide in this hostile territory. Tep, tep, slide, tep. The sounds were my only landmarks. The smooth, cold expanse of marble floor eventually gave way to the soft, absorbent hush of a plush carpet. I had found it. A hallway. The ambient roar of the party began to recede behind me, replaced by the low, steady mechanical hum of the building's own circulatory system. I followed the carpeted path, my free hand trailing along a cool, wood-paneled wall, counting my steps to keep my mind focused. 112. The air grew calmer, the competing scents less aggressive. I could now smell the clean, sterile air of a well-maintained building, with a faint, pleasant undertone of wood polish. I was listening for the gentle whoosh of an automatic bathroom door, for the familiar scent of soap. Instead, my outstretched fingers brushed against the cool, solid brass of a doorknob, turned effortlessly in my hand. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped inside, into a pocket of absolute, heavenly silence. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound final and reassuring. It muffled the last dying embers of the gala into a distant, ignorable hum. The very atmosphere in here was different. It carried the rich, deep scent of oiled leather, the dry, nostalgic smell of old paper and ink, and the faint, bitter aroma of strong, black coffee that had been brewed hours ago and left to sit. It was a scent that spoke of diligent work, of intense focus, of quiet, uninterrupted contemplation. It was a sanctuary. A wave of relief so profound washed over me that my knees felt weak. I leaned my full weight back against the solid wood of the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I drank in the silence, letting it be a soothing balm on my frayed and overstimulated nerves. This room was an island of tranquility in an ocean of unbearable noise. I took a tentative step forward, my cane tapping softly on what felt like a thick, low-pile rug. I began to map the space with my hearing. It was a large room, The sound of my own footsteps was soft, absorbed by the plush carpet and what I could only guess were heavy drapes or floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. There was a faint, low electronic hum coming from my right, a computer most likely asleep. I moved cautiously toward what felt like the center of the room, my hand outstretched, until my fingers found the smooth, cool surface of a large desk. I traced its perimeter, my fingertips discovering the neat, sharp corners of a leather blotter, the cool, weighted cylinder of a pen holder, the solid, dense mass of a paperweight. Everything was in its place. It was an organized space, controlled space. I felt a sudden, sharp pang of something akin to envy for the person who commanded such a peaceful and orderly domain. My hand found a chair, pulled up close to the desk. I could smell the rich leather before I even touched it. It felt solid, substantial, expensive. I lowered myself into it, the supple material sighing softly under my weight. I just needed 5 minutes. 5 minutes to gather myself, to recenter my universe before I had to go back out there and face the sharks again. I let my head fall back against the high backrest, breathing in the calm, masculine scent of the room. Felt safe. Felt grounded. You have 10 seconds to tell me why you're in my office before I have security remove you. The voice sliced through the silence, as smooth and dangerous as polished steel. It came from the corner of the room, from a place I had registered only as a darker patch of silence. My heart leaped into my throat, every muscle in my body locking up in sheer, unadulterated terror. I hadn't been alone at all. I shot to my feet so quickly that the heavy chair scraped loudly backward. My cane clattered from my nerveless fingers to the floor. My carefully constructed sense of safety was shattered into a million pieces, leaving me utterly disoriented and vulnerable. I am so incredibly sorry, I stammered, my hands flying up in front of me, as if to ward off an imminent blow. I had no idea anyone was in here. I was just trying to find a quiet place. The party, it was just too much. There was a long, drawn-out pause. In the stillness, I could hear the faint, soft whisper of expensive fabric as the man moved. His scent reached me then, stronger now that he was closer. It was the scent of the room, but amplified, personalized, worn like a second skin. Leather and coffee, yes, but with a powerful undercurrent of something else. Something clean and sharp, like the crisp air of a winter morning, and a subtle musky note that was purely, unmistakably alpha. It was an overwhelming scent, but not an unpleasant one. It was the scent of absolute, unshakable authority. I was in Stephen Rain's den. The party, he repeated, his voice a low, thoughtful rumble. He was closer now. I could hear the soft, nearly silent tread of his expensive shoes on the thick rug. The surrender party for Brew Industries. There was no trace of triumph in his voice, just a simple, cold statement of fact. You must be a Brew. My name is Brian Brew, I whispered, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. My cheeks burned with a deep, profound humiliation. Of course, he knew. He had just conquered my entire world, dismantled my family's legacy piece by piece. Brian Brew, he said, the name sounding foreign on his tongue, as if he were tasting it. They failed to mention you during the negotiations. The reclusive son. He paused again, and I could feel his presence directly in front of me now, a towering wall of warmth and raw power. The very air seemed to shift and bend around him as he moved. You're blind. It wasn't a question. It was an observation, stated with the same dispassionate, analytical clarity he'd probably used to discuss stock prices or quarterly reports. There was no pity in his tone, no revulsion, only a flicker of surprise. And something else I couldn't quite place. Curiosity. Yes, I managed to say, my voice tight and strained. I should go. I apologize for the intrusion. I bent down, my hands fumbling clumsily for my cane on the floor, my movements jerky and uncoordinated with panic. A hand, large and radiating a surprising warmth, closed gently around my arm before I could find it. The touch was unexpectedly gentle, firm but not bruising. It sent a powerful jolt of pure electricity through me, a primal alpha-omega reaction that I hadn't experienced with such intensity in years. I froze completely. Stay, he said. It wasn't a command, not in the forceful way an alpha could compel an omega's submission. It was quieter, more of an invitation, but it was spoken with the undeniable weight of a man who was not accustomed to being refused. He released my arm, and I heard him bend down. A moment later, the smooth, familiar wood of my cane was pressed firmly into my waiting hand. Thank you, I breathed, my fingers closing around it as if it were a lifeline. You said the party was too much, he stated, his voice still holding that note of intense, almost scientific curiosity. Why? The question was so direct, so utterly unexpected, that it threw me completely off balance. People didn't ask me questions like that. They spoke around me or about me, but they rarely spoke directly to me with such genuine inquiry. The sound, I found myself explaining, the words tumbling out of me before I could stop them, and the sense, is overwhelming. Everyone is projecting. Their emotions are so loud. Their emotions, he mused, as if considering a novel concept. An omega's sensitivity. Something like that, I said, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear in a nervous gesture. It's difficult to distinguish a clear signal from all the noise. And what kind of signal were you picking up out there? He asked. He had moved away toward the desk. I heard the sound of a heavy glass being placed on the polished wood. The faint, sweet aroma of whiskey drifted toward me. I hesitated. Honesty felt like a dangerous gambit. Greed, I said finally, deciding to take the risk. Fear. A great deal of false confidence. It's a very sharp environment. A low chuckle vibrated through the room. A remarkably astute analysis. It seems you don't need eyes to see the truth of that ballroom, do you? He gently guided me back to the chair I had so hastily vacated. Sit, Brian Brew. It would appear you've found the quietest place in the entire building. The very least I can do is allow you to enjoy it for a moment. I sank back into the plush leather chair, utterly bewildered. The most ruthless CEO in the city, the man who had just systematically dismantled my family's empire, was now offering me sanctuary. I couldn't comprehend it. This had to be some kind of intricate game, a power play so subtle that my senses couldn't perceive it. You're trembling, he observed coolly. I'm not accustomed to company, I admitted, my voice small. Especially not my family's conqueror. I left the words hanging, unsaid, in the silent air between us. I would imagine not, he said. I heard the clink of glass again, and then another sound, a small plate being set on the desk near me. The rich, savory aroma of some kind of miniature pastry filled the air, making my mouth water. Your parents are currently working the room, attempting to salvage what little they can from the wreckage. They haven't even noticed you're gone. I flinched at the casual cruelty of his accuracy. They wouldn't. No, he agreed, his voice flat. I suspect they wouldn't. He was closer now, leaning against the edge of the desk. Tell me what this is. I inhaled deeply, analyzing the scents. Smoked salmon on a puff pastry with fresh dill and a little cream cheese. Another low chuckle, this one laced with genuine amusement. Impressive. My sense of smell is developed, I said, feeling a hot blush creep up my neck. It seems all of your senses are, except for the one that most people rely on. He paused, and I could feel his intense focus on me. I find that fascinating. Fascinating. The word hung in the air, a foreign concept. People found my blindness pitiful, tragic, an inconvenience. No one in my entire life had ever called it fascinating. Why are you being kind to me? The question escaped my lips before I could censor it. Raw and honest. Stephen Rain was silent for a long moment. In that quiet, I could hear the soft, steady tick of a clock on the wall, a sound I hadn't noticed before. The city outside hummed its distant, tireless song. Because, he said finally, his voice a low, intimate murmur that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. In a building overflowing with people who are desperately trying to sell me a carefully constructed image of themselves, you are the first genuine thing I have encountered all evening. You're not pretending. You can't. He was right. I couldn't feign confidence with my posture or tell a lie with my eyes. My trembling hands, my faltering voice, my very presence here. A refugee from a party that I couldn't handle. It was all the unvarnished, unfiltered truth. And for some inexplicable reason, this powerful, dangerous man found that refreshing. Now, he said, his tone shifting, becoming lighter, the pastry is at your 10 o'clock. There's a glass of water at your 2. Don't worry, he added, and I could hear the smile in his voice. It's just water. I wouldn't dare offer a brew whiskey on a night like tonight. That could be misconstrued. To my own surprise, I found myself smiling, a small, genuine smile that felt alien on my own face. Thank you, Mr. Rain. Stephen, he corrected softly. And you're welcome, Brian. I sat there, in the quiet, opulent office of the man who had single-handedly ruined my family, and for the first time all night, I felt completely and utterly safe. I ate the pastry, which was every bit as delicious as it smelled, and I listened to the subtle sounds of Stephen Rain simply existing in the same space. The soft rustle of his suit as he moved, the quiet, rhythmic tap of his pen against the desk, the steady, even cadence of his breathing. It was a calm, grounding presence in my chaotic world. I didn't know what game he was playing, or what any of this meant. But here, in the very heart of my family's defeat, in the den of the lion himself, I had stumbled upon an unexpected and bewildering kindness, and I found myself clinging to it, a single, clear note in a symphony of discord. The following morning, the silence in our penthouse was of an entirely different nature. It wasn't the peaceful, grounding silence of Stephen's office. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, thick with unspoken rage and bitter recriminations. I could feel my parents' anger radiating from the other side of the apartment like a toxic heat. My brief vanishing act at the gala had not, it turned out, gone unnoticed. I was in my room, a space they had meticulously furnished with soft textures and sound-dampening panels. A gilded cage designed to keep me perfectly contained. I was running my fingers over the familiar raised dots of a Braille copy of the Odyssey. A small comfort, when the distinctive chime of our private elevator echoed down the hall. We rarely had visitors. A moment later, a sharp, peremptory rap sounded on my door. My mother's scent, sharp and agitated, preceded her into the room. "Brian, get up. We have a guest." "A guest?" I asked, confused. "It's him," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that was thick with dread. "Rain. He's here and he's asking for you." My blood ran cold. Stefan Rain was here. In our home. The lion had followed me back to my cage. I stood up slowly, my hands suddenly slick with a nervous sweat. What could he possibly want with me? My mother all but dragged me into the main living area. The air in the room was electric with tension. My father's presence was a brooding storm cloud of impotent fury. His scent was thick with the smell of stale scotch and utter defeat. And then, cutting through it all was Stefan's scent, clean, sharp, and utterly, unervingly calm. He was an island of absolute control in my family's turbulent sea of chaos. "Mr. Rain," my father's voice was gravelly and hostile. "This is an unexpected intrusion." "Brew," Stefan's voice was cool and even, betraying no emotion. "I believe I was invited. Your son left this in my office last night." I heard a soft click as he placed something small and metallic on the glass coffee table. "It appears to be a family heirloom," he continued, his tone matter of fact. "I wanted to ensure its safe return." My hands flew instinctively to my neck. The small silver locket my grandmother had given me, my most treasured possession, was gone. I hadn't even noticed. It was a smooth, cool comfort that I must have touched 100 times a day. "Brian, say thank you to Mr. Rain," my mother commanded, her voice strained and tight. "Thank you," I whispered, my face burning with embarrassment. I felt like a small child being publicly scolded. "It was no trouble," Stefan said. I could feel him turn his attention fully to me. The weight of his focus was a tangible thing. I was also hoping I might have a word with Brian. Alone. A shocked, heavy silence descended upon the room. My father made a choking, sputtering sound. "Absolutely not," he growled, the word rumbling in his chest. "I'm afraid I must insist." Stefan's voice didn't rise in volume, but the steel beneath his words suddenly became much more apparent. The air crackled with pure alpha authority. My father, a beta, audibly bristled at the challenge, but any protest he might have made died in his throat. The power dynamic in this room had been irrevocably established the moment Stefan stepped out of that elevator. He was the apex predator here. We were merely his prey. After a tense moment that stretched into an eternity, it was my mother who broke the silence. "Fine. 5 minutes. We will be in the dining room." I heard their resentful footsteps retreat. The sharp swish of my mother's silk robe a sound of pure, unadulterated indignation. The silence they left in their wake was filled entirely by Stefan's calm, commanding presence. "They're not very skilled at hiding their true feelings, are they?" he remarked quietly, a hint of amusement in his tone. "No," I agreed. "They never have been." He crossed the room, and I tracked his movement by the sound of his footsteps on the hardwood floor. He stopped directly in front of me. "Your locket." He gently took my hand and placed the cool, familiar silver object into my palm. His fingers brushed against mine for a fleeting moment, and that same powerful jolt of awareness shot up my arm. His skin was warm and dry. "Thank you," I said again, my voice stronger this time. I clutched the locket tightly in my fist. "You didn't have to bring it yourself." "I wanted to," he said simply. "I also wanted to apologize." I frowned, turning my head toward the sound of his voice. "Apologize? For what?" For my part in your family's current circumstances. Business is business, Brian, but I saw the distress it caused you last night. That was never my intention. I was speechless. This man, this corporate titan who had just crushed us, was apologizing to me? It wasn't your fault, I said, the words feeling inadequate. My father made some poor decisions. Perhaps, Stefan allowed. Still, I find that I do not enjoy being the source of your discomfort. He paused, which is why I came here today to make a proposition. My guard went up instantly.
À proposition?
I would like to take you to lunch. I was certain I had misheard him. Lunch? Yes. There is a restaurant, Aria, that specializes in a multi-sensory dining experience. They create dishes specifically designed to engage scent and texture as much as taste. I thought you might enjoy it. The situation was utterly surreal. Was this some bizarre, twisted form of gloating? A way to further humiliate my family by parading their broken son around the city? My Omega senses searched for any hint of malice, any cruel intent hidden beneath his calm exterior. I found none. What I did find was that same intense, analytical curiosity from the night before, now mingled with something else, something softer. Sincerity. Why? I asked bluntly, forgoing all pretense. He was quiet for a moment. Because I would like to get to know you better, Brian Brew. Because you are an anomaly. You navigate a world of sharks without the primary tool they all use, sight, and yet you seem to see things more clearly than any of them. I want to understand how. His explanation was analytical, almost clinical, yet it felt more honest than any flowery compliment could ever be. He wasn't pitying me. He was intrigued by me. In his world of quantifiable assets and strategic maneuvers, I was a variable he couldn't immediately solve, a puzzle he felt compelled to understand. And what if I say no? Then I will thank you for your time and leave, he said, his voice perfectly even. But I hope that you will say yes. I thought about the oppressive, suffocating silence of this apartment. I thought about the bitter resentment of my parents, which clung to the air like a foul odor. I thought about the gilded cage they had so carefully constructed for me over the years. For the first time in my entire life, someone was offering me a key. It might be a trick. It might lead to another, more dangerous cage. But it was a choice, and it was my choice to make. Okay, I said, the word coming out as a soft breath of air. Yes, I'll have lunch with you. I could practically feel the smile in his voice. Excellent. Shall we say tomorrow at 1? My driver will be here to pick you up. I'll be ready. He started to leave, his footsteps moving toward the door. Then he stopped. Brian? Yes? For what it's worth, he said, his voice softer, more personal than it had been before. Your parents are fools. What they perceive as a weakness, I believe it may very well be your greatest strength. And then he was gone, leaving me standing alone in the center of the room, clutching my grandmother's locket. His words echoed in the silence, a stark and stunning contrast to a lifetime of being told that I was broken, defective, less than whole. A great strength. The idea was so foreign, so radical, it felt like learning an entirely new language. My parents stormed back into the room the moment they heard the elevator depart. What did he want? My father demanded, his voice rough. What did you say to him? He returned my locket, I said, my own voice calm and steady in a way that surprised even me. And he invited me to lunch tomorrow. You refused, of course, my mother exclaimed, her voice shrill with panic. No, I said, turning to face the direction of their voices, a strange and unfamiliar sense of resolve solidifying within me like steel. I accepted. The ensuing explosion of their anger and disbelief was a familiar storm, but for the first time in my life, I felt as though I were standing in the eye of it, completely untouched. Their words, their accusations of betrayal, their panicked fears of what this could possibly mean, they all felt distant, muted. Stefan Rain had walked into my prison and had not only offered me a glimpse of the outside world, but had also handed me a shield forged from his own perplexing, fascinating interest. I didn't know his true motives, and I certainly didn't trust him completely. But as I stood my ground against the hurricane of my parents' fury, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer a silent instrument locked away in a velvet case. I was finally, at long last, going to play my own song. True to his word, at precisely 1 o'clock the next day, a car arrived for me. The doorman, whose shuffling steps and wheezing breath were as familiar to me as the building's own ambient hum, announced its arrival through the intercom with a tone of uncharacteristic reverence. My mother had refused to speak to me all morning, radiating a cold, furious silence, while my father had simply locked himself in his study. Their disapproval was a thick, suffocating blanket, but for the first time, it didn't smother me. It felt more like a distant storm on the horizon. Stefan's driver was a quiet man who smelled faintly of mint and expensive leather upholstery. He helped me into the car with a practiced, impersonal efficiency that I appreciated. The vehicle itself was an oasis of calm. It moved through the chaotic city symphony with a smooth, silent grace, insulating me from the jarring noises and harsh scents of the outside world. Aria was an experience before we even stepped inside. The air around the entrance was infused with the clean, green scent of eucalyptus and rosemary. The sound of a small, gentle fountain gurgled nearby, a liquid counterpoint to the city's harsh percussion. A maitre d' with a voice like warm honey greeted us. "Mr. Rain's guest? Welcome. We are honored to have you." He led me to a secluded table, not by pulling my arm, but by letting me rest my hand on his elbow, his steps measured and clear. The restaurant was not silent, but the sounds were soft, curated. The gentle murmur of conversation, the hushed clink of cutlery on ceramic, the soft strains of an instrumental piece that seemed to weave through the air like a silk ribbon. I was just settling into my chair when Stefan's scent announced his arrival a moment before his voice did. Leather, coffee, that crisp, clean note of winter air. It was becoming a familiar and strangely comforting scent. "Brian, I'm glad you came." His voice was a low, warm rumble that cut through the restaurant's soft ambience, meant only for me. "Stefan," I replied, a small smile finding its way to my lips. "Your texturally interesting restaurant awaits my verdict." I could hear the smile in his voice. I'm on the edge of my seat. I took the liberty of speaking with the chef. He's prepared a tasting menu for us, focusing on scent and texture. The meal was a revelation. It was a journey taken not with eyes, but with every other sense. There was a chilled cucumber soup that was smooth as silk on the tongue, with the surprising poppy texture of toasted quinoa and a burst of mint that felt like cool air. There was a seared scallop, tender and yielding, that rested on a bed of creamy, gritty polenta, the contrast a delight. There was a piece of slow-braised lamb so tender it dissolved in my mouth, its rich flavor enhanced by the earthy scent of truffle and the surprising crunch of a dehydrated mushroom crisp. Stefan was the perfect guide. He didn't just let me experience it. He participated with me. He would describe the colors on the plate in a low, objective tone. The soup is a pale green, like new leaves in spring, with the dark flecks of the quinoa scattered on top, and then ask me to describe the textures and scents in return. We were sharing a single experience through our different senses, building a complete picture together. You're right, I said, after a course involving a fascinating foam that tasted of Parmesan and felt like a cloud. This is incredible. I had a feeling you would appreciate it, he said. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. You experience the world more intensely than most, don't you? I have to, I said simply. Is how I see. I paused, then decided to be brave. Tell me what you see, Stefan. Right now. He was silent for a moment. I heard him shift in his seat, the soft rustle of expensive fabric. I see a man who is more at ease in a strange restaurant than he was in his own home. I see a quiet strength that his family has mistaken for fragility. And I see he hesitated. I see someone who is listening to me, truly listening. It's a rare quality. His words sent a warmth spreading through my chest, entirely separate from the wine I was sipping. He wasn't just intrigued by my blindness. He was beginning to see me. We talked for hours. He asked about my life, and for the first time I told someone. I told him about learning Braille, about the frustration and triumph of navigating a familiar room on my own for the first time. I told him about my love for audiobooks, for music, for the stories the world told through sound and scent. I didn't paint it as a tragedy. I just told him my reality. And he, in turn, told me about his. A world of constant pressure, of 16-hour days and high-stakes decisions. A world of superficial interactions and transactional relationships. He spoke of the loneliness at the top, a sentiment so stark and genuine it resonated with my own lifetime of isolation. His world was as much of a cage as mine was, just with gilded bars of power and wealth. They all want something from me, he said, his voice low. The clatter of the restaurant had faded into a background hum. My board, my competitors, my so-called friends. They see the CEO, the alpha, the bank account. They don't see the man. I don't know what a CEO looks like, I said softly, and I can't see a bank account. I only sense the man, and he sounds tired. The silence that followed was profound. I felt a wave of emotion from him, so potent it was like a physical touch. Surprise, vulnerability, and a startling, deep-seated relief. The feeling of being truly seen, without the use of eyes at all. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with an emotion I couldn't name. You, Brian Brew, are a very dangerous man. I think that was the moment something shifted between us, irrevocably. The curiosity became something deeper. The fascination, something more personal. The lunches became a regular occurrence. Sometimes we went to Aria. Other times he would have food sent up to his quiet, safe office, and we would talk for hours. He took me to a private concert in a small, acoustically perfect hall, where the music of a solo cello washed over us, so rich and resonant it felt like I could touch the notes. He took me to a botanical garden after hours, and I walked through the humid air of the greenhouses, my fingers brushing against the velvety leaves. The waxy petals, the prickly stems of 100 different plants, their scents a symphony of green, growing life. With every meeting, the walls I had built around myself crumbled a little more, and I could sense the walls around him, the impenetrable fortress of the Alpha CEO, beginning to lower as well. He started to delegate more at work, carving out time for us. His scent, when he was with me, began to lose its sharp edge of focus and stress, softening into something more relaxed, more content. And so, the blind Omega, once hidden away as a family's shame, found himself truly seen by the one man he should have feared the most. In the quiet world they built together, one of scent, sound, and touch, the ruthless Alpha who had conquered an empire found himself, unexpectedly, conquered by a single, genuine soul. What do you think Stefan's true intentions were at the beginning? Was it just curiosity? Or did he feel an instant connection the moment he met Brian? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more tales of unexpected love.